Today on BRStv, we're going to show you how a 1-inch lens, a few-inch puck, or even a small panel of LEDs can all be used to create that same even spread as an entire bank of T5s. Seems impossible, but it can be done with just a few tweaks of the lights you already have. Hey, this is Ryan with BRStv's Master Reef Tank Lighting mini-series, Set It and Forget It lighting tools for perfecting coral coloration, growth, and health. This is episode 2, where we dive deep into the importance of the first of 3 critical components in reef tank lighting, spread. The overwhelming value of achieving that even intensity light coverage or blanket of soft light. Light's where 90% of the coral's energy comes from, and getting this right will have a significant return on the time put into it. If you're having challenges with your lights or corals, or not sure if you've mounted or spaced your lights correctly, want to make sure that you're using the right light, or simply want to get it right the first time, we solve all of that today. In last week's series intro, we shared some of the fundamentals, or how, and lighting proficiency, but today we explore the why and the path to mastering reef lighting, the finer details of really getting this right, what spread is, why it's important, what today's spread challenges are, and the detailed methods of achieving ideal spread in an LPS, SPS, and even mixed reef tank. Starting with what spread means in relation to a reef tank, simply put, light spread is the degree or angle of light, with 3 common spreads in a reef tank: spotlights, soft floodlights, and soft diffused light. A spotlight's light source is typically much smaller than the object. In this case, the reef tank often uses lenses to create a narrow beam of focused high power light that travels further before dispersing. That makes a spotlight ideal for mounting higher above the tank, like 13 to 24 inches, as well as penetrating deeper 3-foot plus tanks. By definition, a spotlight and focus beams are hard light that creates dark and light areas with hard shadows for a high contrast image and sense of depth. That effect can look really awesome in some tanks, but also very undesirable for the health of corals in others, something that we'll get to in just a moment. Looking at the data Brent and Randy have collected, I think a couple of good examples of spotlights in our hobby are the Hydra 32, which is an ideal mounting height 14 inches above the tank, the Q Maven 15 inches, and the Orphic Compact is best mounted 16 inches above your tank. The Hydra 32 obviously has a very compact design and fairly focused lens. The Q Maven total size is actually large, but the light source is still a small fraction of the tank that it's illuminating. The larger size of the Orphic Compact may come as a surprise when we mention spotlights, but they've intentionally designed the individual lens array and even mounting legs to be mounted higher off the tank. Higher mounting heights, making it easier to get in and out of the tank. I'd also note that these higher mounting heights of 16 to 24 inches off the tank is what's commonly implemented by the pros at many aquaculture facilities, likely for similar reasons. So you can start to see the right tool being selected for the right job here. The second type of light is the soft floodlight. As the name suggests, a floodlight will flood the tank with light rather than focus it. A wide-angle light designed to disperse light over a larger area at close distances. Floodlights are more even in intensity, so hot and cold spots can be nearly eliminated, even at the very top of the tank. The word soft in the soft floodlight meaning a tendency to wrap around an object, in this case our corals, blanking them in light and reducing shadows. In fact, in most cases, that ultra wide angle light mounted close to the tank actually improves coverage because the wide angle light bounces off the glass inside the tank better, creating an even softer wrap around the corals and even distribution. Something that can easily be seen in the par numbers, particularly at the top of the tank. The other advantage to the wider angle soft floodlight design is multiple intersecting wide light sources or multiple LED modules are much easier to blend for even performance. Number of required units goes down and spacing is just much easier, ultimately improving that even distribution or wrap of light. That makes soft floodlights ideal for anyone who's mounting their lights 6 to 12 inches off the surface of the tank, which is by far the most common range. I think that range is popular just because that's what the hood allows, or mounting lights close to the water often reduces the appearance of cords, mounting brackets, hanging kits, and overall visual appeal of the overall tank. That said, it's important to note while the wide-angle even coverage soft floodlights sound attractive, if you mount them higher than they're designed for, that wide-angle light will spill outside of the tank and there'll be significant efficiency losses. You can start to see why there's no best option for everyone, and it's all about that right tool for the right job. A couple of good examples of soft light from flood lamps are the Kessil 360X and Radion G5s, both of which tested best mounted at 8 inches off the water, but also perform well as little as 6. Just completely flat, soft light, even at the very top of the tank, in what I call near ideal performance, achieving this type of soft, even spread, very similar to a 2-foot grid of T5s with much smaller form factor and at a very low mounting height is an obvious engineering challenge, and likely part of why these particular light sources come with a higher price tag. Next up, soft diffused light is defined by that characteristic to blanket the tank in light, wrapping nearly every object in light from all visible angles and nearly eliminating shadows. This type of soft diffused light is partially related to lens design and coatings, but diffused lighting that truly wraps an object and eliminates shadows will always come from a light source that is close to the size of the object that it's illuminating. In this case, close to the size of the tank itself. But soft diffused light can also be achieved more dynamically with multiple intersecting smaller light sources in a grid or array. Soft diffused light will not just even out par and eliminate hot and cold spots. That wrap of light dramatically reduces shadows within the coral structure itself, which is particularly valuable with larger SPS colonies' growth and color. This type of light also reflects off the glass so well that it often illuminates the undersides of many corals. Again, particularly helpful to the base tissue of many SPS corals. I'll go as far as to say if a wall-to-wall SPS tank is your goal, soft diffused light is the right path. Other approaches may work okay, but not as well. As SPS corals grow larger, shadow themselves in bases, it will become obvious why soft, diffused light will always reduce challenges and improve results. The most obvious example of soft, diffused light where the light source matches the size of the tank is a bank of T5s. You can take one look at this and instantly understand why this type of light will illuminate the tank and corals from all angles and achieve everything that we just discussed. I think it's important to note that a bank of T5s is basically ideal spread performance. Everything else is just an attempt to match that spread performance that a panel of T5s as large as a tank produces. Most attempts to emulate T5 performance with LEDs will cost 2 to 3 times as much and maybe not even as good. I can't stress enough that if the goal is a reef tank on a budget, particularly an SPS tank, T5s are the best option out there. In fact, I know an overwhelming amount of reefers who will say that the super soft diffused light from T5s is just the best option out there regardless of cost. This is obviously even more true with less than ideal LED designs or installations. If keeping costs down is a priority, but you also want the best implementations out there, T5s are the best path. That said, we have to acknowledge LEDs are the future, have some cool advantages, and are here to stay. A couple of other common examples for soft diffused light are basically any LED paired with the Aquatic Life T5 fixture, something that we demonstrated in a BRStv Investigates with the Aquatic Life hybrid fixture paired with the AI Prime, Kessil 360, and the Ecotech XR15s. Those and a ton of other LED options will create the primary source of light paired with fill light from the T5s and achieves that blanket of light that wraps around the corals. In fact, the Aquatic Life Kessil hybrid solution be my personal favorite lighting option for many years on nearly every tank type. The T5 LED hybrid, the intersection of spread, spectrum, and par needs for me, achieved with a pleasant shimmer, color pop, adjustability, and a lower cost point than achieving the same results with LEDs alone. The best example of using LEDs alone for soft diffused light is ultra-wide flood lamps mounted fairly close to each other to get that network of intersecting light from multiple light sources and reflections off the glass. The best results that we've seen to date from the data collected on our 120 test tank has been 4 Radion G5 XR15s. 4 lights like this to cover a 2 by 4 foot area is also one of the easiest to implement options. Another option which tested really well was a grid of 8 AI primes. This is one small light source, each covering a single square foot and intersecting with each other. Even though it's more units, it's significantly lower cost than 3 Radions, in fact about the same as 2. This grid array approach to soft diffused light also provides one of the spread options that's truly unique to LEDs. The ability to zone the entire tank foot by foot based on your corals, really the ultimate option for mixed reefs. Zoning the tank is certainly the end game in most advanced lighting technique and can mean lowering the intensity on the back of the tank where the corals are higher, raising the intensity on the front of the tank where the corals are often closer to the bottom. On a mixed reef, even zoning particular areas for coral types, unique spread and par numbers for each foot of the tank, even configurable to test higher or lower par on certain corals without affecting the rest of the tank. At this point, I'm sure it's much easier to see the difference between a spotlight, floodlight, and soft diffused light. One is not better than the other. It's always about the right tool for the right job. Consider the corals you want to keep, your desired mounting height, budget, and how reef nerdy you want to take your implementation. It's obvious that I personally value the attributes of soft diffused light, but there's actually some very common instances where I appreciate wide floodlights even more. 2 of them are in my office, and you'll see why in a moment. The big question is, how do you take this knowledge and apply it to your tank for best results and feel like you really got this lighting specific to your tank mastered? I got some very specific spread guidance for LPS, SPS, and mixed reef tanks. They all have different requirements, options, and benefits. Starting with, if an LPS, polyp, and softy tank is your goal, you're in luck. These types of corals simply are more forgiving and less dependent on perfect spread, at least to some degree, because they have the ability to move and expose different areas of tissue to light and crust surfaces so they don't shadow themselves, and many can do really well in low light areas of the tank. They're also often better at capturing prey and supplemental nutrition, so ultra soft, even lighting is just less critical in an LPS tank. All of that means we can consider other priorities as well. I believe a single wide-angle flood mounted at the optimal mounting height is a great solution. With one good option, 1 every 2 feet, that will meet biological needs of an LPS tank, but also intentionally add in shadows, lighter and darker areas in the aquascape. In other words, the trade-off here with an LPS tank is the decreased reliance on perfect spread is a visually interesting high-contrast tank with intentional shadows and a sense of depth. The 2 AI primes we used on the 40 breeder and 5-minute guide to reefing is a good example of a tank that's lit well to the coral's needs, but also contrasty and visually interesting. I also mentioned 2 of the examples of this in my office with a single 360X on my softy and polyp tank, as well as the LPS 60-gallon cubes. Not only has this worked well for me visually and biologically inside the tank, but also visually outside of the tank. The small form factor LED modules offer is also one of the most enticing features. The 360X is the smallest form factor wide angle floodlight that I've used. Mounting arm hides the cords and just a clean option that's always out of the way. I can get in and out of the tank without even considering the light. That said, most of the popular lights out there are capable of the PAR requirements for an LPS tank and support the needs of that, but I do believe for an LPS, polyp, and softy tank like these, the 360X option is the best option out there biologically as well as visually inside and outside the tank. SPS tanks, on the other hand, are starkly different. These corals do not have the ability to move and expose different areas of tissue. As they grow, the branching or plating growth will increasingly shadow their inner tissue, the tissue at their bases that encrust the rock, and even more challenging, their neighbors. The challenge here is small 1-inch SPS frags or even few-inch colonies do well without a lot of thought. But as a tank really comes into itself and the colonies grow larger, the lack of attention to spread shows up in brown tissue, dying tissue on the inner layers of corals and bases and neighboring corals, and absolutely increased mortality. The tragic part is this happens right about at that goal point. We put a couple of years of work to get here, only now to run into unexpected challenges that if you didn't know any better, might be hard to identify the cause of. Obviously, once we understand the importance with spread and SPS corals, and more importantly, the why, we can skip that entire learning curve. The solution, all those soft, diffused lighting solutions we discussed. A bank of T5s close to the size of the tank, multiple intersecting LED floodlights, a grid of smaller lights, or the more affordable hybrid of the two with T5s supplemented with wide-angle LEDs. T5s providing that right spectrum, PAR, and spread. LEDs offering the shimmer, color, coral pop, and adjustability that make LEDs attractive. We have examples of each here at BRS. The XXL 750, which is LED only in a grid of Radeon G4s. Zax SPS 60 Cube, which is a bank of 8 ATI T5s, 6 blue plus, 1 coral plus, and 1 purple plus, with a Reef Bright blue XHO LED for a bit of shimmer and fluorescence or coral pop that comes from those 450 nanometer LEDs. The BRS 160, which is 4 blue plus T5s in a retro solution supported with Kessel 360Xs, a personal favorite solution of mine. And the E170, a simple, no sump, all-in-one approach to an SPS tank that we built for the BRS WWC Hybrid Series. That tank has gone in from adding those 1-inch frags to this in just 12 months. Unlike the SPS and Softy ULMs on either side, all we did is add the Aquatic Life T5 Retro to transition from a floodlight to a soft diffused light appropriate for an SPS tank. The one outlier in all this is a mixed reef tank, which has corals of all types. In this case, you're caring for a wide variety of coral types, all in the same tank with very different environments that they thrive in, which is absolutely much more challenging than optimizing for a group of corals with similar needs. In this case, I'd optimize to the minimum goal for the corals that you're keeping. So because you have SPS corals, soft diffused light will still produce the best results. However, if your tank is LPS and softy dominant with only a few SPS frags, wide-angle floodlights spaced further apart but combined with an intelligent placement of the SPS frags themselves will likely be adequate. With all that in mind, regardless of the light that you're using or even tank type, this is how you can configure your lighting for optimal spread. It's in two things: mounting height and spacing between the modules. Getting mounting height right should be as easy as reading the manufacturer's description, and that should get you close with the most reputable ones. However, that's a generic recommendation and not based on your tank shape or size. I believe the easiest way to identify a decent mounting height is simply have a friend lift up the light while you look for spill into the room. There will always be some spill, but it shouldn't exceed 15% or so of the light leaving the tank, something that you can eyeball to a reasonable degree. Outside of that, I'd look for a BRStv Investigates because Randy has largely done the work for you with thousands of par measurements to hone in on that best mounting height for lights that BRS offers. This is done on a 60 cube and 120 gallon tank. Even if your tank has different dimensions, this will get you close or a legit frame of reference for most tanks so you can make an educated guess. However, if you've made it to this point in this video, it's pretty likely you're very engaged with your tank, and there's no question a par meter is the best way to know that you got this right. It's not just that getting it right is important, it's the satisfaction that comes from knowing it definitively, and the results that come from setting it up right the first time and then leaving it alone. The second consideration is spacing, not just how close they are, but also where to put them on the tank, and I can tell you right now that evenly spacing them over the tank is the wrong way to go about it, and it shows in the data. In this case, you can reference a manufacturer's recommended coverage area, but it'll provide zero guidance on spacing. Spacing is challenging because it would seem that spacing them evenly over the tank would provide the best results, but the reality is all the light sources intersect in the center, and it creates a hot spot in the center of the tank and cold spot on the sides. However, with a few subtle adjustments of moving the lights out towards the sides a few inches, we can make the sides of the tank about 70% of the par of the center, which is nice even coverage. The one caveat to this is using multiple lower to mid-range powered LEDs like an array of XR15s or AI primes makes this less critical because there's so much intersecting light coming from so many different areas of the tank. However, even then, there's good, and then there's mastering spread for ideal results. Identifying ideal spacing is a legit challenge even with a par meter because it requires so many measurements, adjustments, more measurements, and then repeat until it's right. In this case, if Randy's done and investigates on your light, I'd call it invaluable to take a look at the BRS recommended spacing results. Even if your tank is not the same size, it'll give you solid information on how your lights interact with others to a net result. Absolutely worth the time. A par meter rental, that $70 option that confirms that you got this all right. We have an entire episode on using a par meter called How to Use a Par Meter the Right Way, which details how to use this tool for the best results. Spectrum's the next obvious performance factor. What do all these spectrum charts mean? What happens when I move those LED sliders? It's not just color to the eye, and this can be done anything from very poorly to near perfect. So that's the next episode in our Master Reef Tank Lighting mini-series. A link to that pinned down in the comments below or right here.